All right, go
All
for it,
right, well
Brad.
let's get rolling. Again, this series that we're doing is called Collective Conversations, and really this is a focus on coaching in crisis and the ability to really lean into some things that we might not normally talk about, either as leaders in our home or leaders at work. Either way, we're all leading, in some capacity, whether it be our children or our spouse or a group of teams, or we're on a team, or we might be leading an organization, or we might be leading a group of leaders. So for us, really, this is just helping people during this time, giving good practices, good thoughts, and maybe looking at some things from a couple different lenses and a little bit deeper than maybe the conversation's going on right now. So what I'd like to just start with, Rob, is just if you could just give us a little introductory about yourself and just really, who you are, where you're from. Tell us a little bit about yourself, personally and professionally. I'm a big story guy and want to know about people. And I think that's important for everybody out here. And then, I'll ask a couple other questions and then we'll kind of get into what we were going to talk about today.
Yeah. Well, I was born at a young age. Um, I was born in South Africa. My mom's on this. My mom is online, so I'm going to be very brief with that, so she doesn't call me out, call me a liar. Um, Grew up in South Africa. Obviously, came to the States. I'm in America now. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. So chased a girl here, and we're coming up on about 15, 16, maybe 16 years. A couple kids, four kids that I know of. And so we spent some time in California, and then we've been in Nashville for probably 12 years now. And it's just, it's been a good journey on that. And throughout that journey, my professional context has kind of taken me into the nonprofit space, kind of working at the intersection of the nonprofit space and the business space, and helping nonprofits think more sustainably and businesses think more socially, not social media, but more socially, more impactful. How do we reach beyond just our customer? And then that's since transitioned in the last few years into this integrative leadership development space, helping leaders, teams, and organizations catch up to who they are more than just what they do. And so combining being and doing, head and heart, or however you want to see that. And so um, that's a little bit of the world that unpacks into so many different shapes, sizes, colors, and facets as we take that into the marketplace or into an organization. But I love it. And so I get to study on the topic. I get to practice on the topic. So I do enjoy that. I am doing school forever and ever, it feels like, and it continues to go. But I get to not just learn, but practice. So I'd say I'm more of a practicing educator. So that's been a good joy. So I love what I get to do, and it's continuing to emerge.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, we're now in a crisis, a global crisis, and so some of the stuff that I do has been helpful for myself, and maybe it'll be helpful for somebody else.
Sure. What's been some of the maybe ahas or rewarding things that you've had, like on this quest of what you're getting into with the organizations and work and leaders, and then obviously at home? What have some have been most maybe the rewarding and maybe aha kind of like exciting things that you believe have been coming out of your work, maybe just in recent memory?
Uh, I think that I always say this: you can't go places you're not willing to go yourself.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, you can't take other people to places that you're not willing to go yourself. So an aha moment for me was when I had to go to some places I didn't want to go. Places in my own story, my own journey, my own life, my own leadership, places that I was stuck. And it's those moments where I turned into myself, and not a narcissistic self. I just turned into the insides of who I was, that the lights came on for me to begin to look around and realize, like, oh gosh, I'm actually not that unique and I'm not that alone. Everyone around me is wrestling with the tension of the insides of who they are with the outsides and how they come out and play out in our everyday life. So the lights came on for me when the lights came on for me.
Hmm.
It
Good.
was, it's like, and the more I continue to do that, the more work I do, the more I begin to see other people. I had a health challenge a year ago, and it's given me more empathy and perspective for people that have been going through health challenges in the past, and I would just go, oh, are you better? Are you good? Like, because I didn't have the language or the experience personally, so I was left to imagine what it was like to be them, and then respond with imagination rather than experience. And so the lights came on for me when I began to do my own work and began to experience the things that I now begin to help others walk through. Because their lives are not mine, and my life is not theirs. But we can say, if I'm willing to know how afraid I am, well, then I can sit with you in how afraid you are. I don't have to be afraid for the same reasons, but I can recognize fear and know how I have sat in that. And then I can be closer to you in your crisis and help guide you and say, well, not here's 3 things I did, but this is how I sat with my fear. And so the lights came on in that way. And I think it was having a common language for understanding how to connect the head and the heart. And as I learned some of those languages for myself, I began to look around and then try to teach the languages to the people around me. Not forcefully. Sometimes I try to forcefully teach people stuff. Doesn't go so well. But I think beginning to start to invite like my wife and my kids and to say, hey, do you want to learn this language? Because this is the language that I've learned, and it's helping me show up to myself more. Do you want to learn how to speak it? Because then you'll know me more, but you'll probably know yourself more. And then together, when my wife says to me, I'm lonely with you, it's not like I know what that means. Like we have the same definition of what loneliness means. And in fact, she's giving me a gift. She's telling me she's lonely. And lonely needs connection. So it's actually a reach. So those are some of the things that, the lights came on when the lights came on for me. So,
Sure.
yeah.
No,
I'm a
that's great.
fire
And thank
hose,
you for
by the
sharing
way.
that. Yeah, no, you're good. I think, for me, we've been able to do some work together, and I think that the one thing that you've influenced me on and a lot of people around, kind of in our sphere, especially when we go work with business leaders and stuff like that, is that you're very present, and you even tell them, hey, I have some fear about even getting up and talking in front of you in this room. You guys
Yeah.
know how to knock it down, kill it, drag it home, and I don't, but I
Yeah.
believe I have something that's deeper and different, and let's go explore that. And your presence and just saying how you feel in the moment, really, I even see like posture change in the room. It's just
Mm,
like that. Oh, wow, I'm allowed to do this. And so that's
yeah.
why I was so encouraged when you guys said, because we do a lot of work with Transform Leader. We love you guys. You guys put out amazing stuff that is very, very practical, and it's very deep and has the ability to produce that transformation that a lot of people are looking for, even in a time like this. So when you said you are developing something that could help us process through our fears and our courage, I was like, yes, like this is awesome. So with that, I wanted to really just step into this today and just talk about, you created an exercise and a tool that I did myself, and I actually have here in front of me, that I might, as we go through this, know that I've answered all these questions, that maybe I can give some of that, as we go. But I'm going to have my guys put in there the link to it. This is actually we fixed it this time, everybody. We did it backwards so you can actually see it now. Last week it was backwards. So Jordan mirrored it because that's what he does. And so Transform Leader. So good, right?
Amazing.
But it'll be in our link in our bio, and it's transformleader .com /virus. But I would encourage you, if you're in front of a computer, can bring it up. That's great. But we're going to talk about it here. I guess for all I wanted to start with, and you kind of alluded to it, obviously, in your opening, is that why did you create this in the moment that we're in? Like what was that? Like, oh man, this just feels like something we need to do and put out there, for people to really like process.
I think we live in a culture that makes the top of the pile information. It's knowledge. And I think knowledge is great. Like I'm getting education and I'm getting degrees and whatever else, but knowledge that doesn't transcend the classroom or doesn't transcend the textbook is really not knowledge you can do much with. And so the media is pumping out information every single day. It's like this is happening and that's happening and this is happening, and it's all according to certain media outlets, and they've all got an agenda, right? They're trying to stay in business. They have to write provocative stories, and then some of them have to write informative stories. And I think what happens in leadership development, it happens in companies, it happens with leaders, it happens in families, it happens just across the world. Even reading a book, is we're saturated in a culture that has elevated the transference of information. If I can teach you something, well, then you'll change. That's just not going to happen. You think of people, even students they talk about their teacher. Well, that teacher invested in me. They had an experience with an educator, which then opened them up to learn. It wasn't like, wow, my teacher in fourth grade was such a good teacher that I then started to listen more. It was like, no, they saw me. And you have an experience, and out of your experience, you open yourself up to listen and to learn and to grow. And so when this kind of challenge happened, there's a part of me that goes, all I'm seeing, and it's good, some of it's good, but there's a saturation of information. Is there something else we can offer people to give them an experience with themselves in a way that can then translate into action, behavior, information, or whatever else, but give them an experience? I'm not going to tell you what you're feeling. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your feelings. I'm not going to tell you what's going to work out in your life. I'm not going to tell you if you're going to be fired or not. If you do get let go and retrenched, I'm not telling you how it's going to work out. I don't actually know. Now, you can read an article that'll put you at ease, but what if I gave you a little more of your insides to wrestle with, to have, and then to reprocess, and then to eventually come out in action or some form of action or behavior, but it's gone through the heart and soul of who you are, not just your brain. Because, man, you will not keep up with the information that's being pumped out daily across the world, and you can't keep up with it. And eventually you don't even know who to believe. And people are designed to create stuff that's not believable because it's good for ratings. So this exercise is not to teach anybody anything. I have no idea what they'll come out with it, but I do know that it gives them the gift of an experience to face some of the things in their lives that they probably don't have a structure or framework to walk through without it.
That's awesome. And one of the first questions, and that's great, because like I love the idea of bringing our insides out with like not just having the knowledge piece, right? It's more like, wow, this is stirring something that is in my gut and in my heart, not just something that's going to go in and out, because this, even the phone that we're on, the amount of information that we can get is just insane, So how does it make you really take it and almost push it down further into a deeper discussion? And one of the things, your first question that's really on it talks about identifying your giant. Can you kind of explain to everybody, what a giant is and why it's important to identify, that giant? And if we need examples, I have mine, but why is that tell us about a giant. Yeah.
I think we all live in a world where, at least here in Nashville, we live with thermostats, right? You've maybe heard this analogy before, but it's cold in the winter and it's hot in the summer. So we figured out how to live between 68 degrees Fahrenheit and 72. So we're at 68 to 72, and that's where we like to keep our lives. I don't want to get too hot and I don't want to get too cold. And so everything that's happening right now, we've been pushed into like some really uncomfortable territory. And the first question, identify your giant, is often, if you don't say out loud what you're thinking or feeling or what you're afraid of or what you want, even good things or bad things, if you don't say them out loud, your head is left to just stir and stir and stir, and you run in circles and you run in circles and you add layers and dimensions to something. But it's one thing to say this. It's just scary to say something scary, but it's also scary to say something good. Like, hey, I really want this job. Oh gosh, did that come out of my mouth? Like, I really want this to happen. Like, even good things are scary to say out loud, because if the moment you say them out loud to another human being, you've set yourself up for the potential of loss. Hey, did you get that job? Hey, did you get what you wanted? No, I guess I should have just not said that out loud. Now everyone keeps asking me. But what you're denying them, but saying it out loud or saying your giant out loud, it gives yourself and other people the opportunity to be in it with you, good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
You may not get the job. Well, guess what? I'll be with you in your sadness. You may get the job. I'll be with you in your gladness.
Sure.
Okay. And so the giant is a way for you just to say, in light of all the noise, what is this insurmountable challenge that I'm facing right now? And if I was to actually give words to it and write it down, oh gosh, I just said it out loud. Like
Mm-hmm.
that itself is like, people don't realize that, but that's a big step. And we'd
Sure.
rather not actually say it. We would rather just keep it like running around in our head and our anxieties and running circles around us. And so that's what the first step is. What's your giant? You know?
Sure. No, that's great. And I mean, I'm going to be vulnerable here and just kind of say, like for me, and this is a lot of my own work. And if I can't show up to the people and people who are watching it now and who will watch it later, for me, it was, the coronavirus has significantly affected my business, and it could lead to financial strains even further on my business, paying my employees, my bills, and even providing for my family.
Yeah.
That's what I'm struggling with, right? Like I am.
Yeah.
That's a giant that I don't know right now what's going on. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so think about what you just did there. You actually took it a step further, right? Your giant is what? There is a global pandemic that's affecting my business.
mm-hmm.
Okay, that's a giant. That's as simple as it is.
Sure.
And then the next question becomes, well, let's explore the fear
Yeah, that's
behind
where
that.
I'm going
Okay.
next.
And that's even what you started to touch on. So go
Yes.
there, because now it's like you just told me, gosh, this is really affecting me. And then I would say to you, well, how bad could it get?
Mm-hmm.
Because what I want
Sure.
to do is I want to take you out of that 68 to 72 degrees. I want to
Sure.
push you down into the like 50s. Like when it gets really cold in the 40s, and freak, man, it gets way too cold here in the winter, like the 20s and the 10s. It's so freezing here. So if
Yeah.
we can take you all the way, how bad could it get for you, Brad?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, even because that was my next question is like, we wanted to explore our fears and even write those down. And you kind of say, hey, what's your worst case scenarios and how do you react to them, if we give into them? And, when I wrote mine down, my fears and anxieties, it says, am I able going to eat? I'm a leadership coach. Am I even going to be able to lead through this? Am I going to be
Yeah.
found out? Right?
Yeah.
Can I pay
Yeah.
my employees? Will my clients postpone and not come back?
Yeah.
How long can we go with this financially? We'll be able to pivot and help our clients and customers in the times where they need us the most right now. Is my family do we have ability to survive 6, 9, 12 months with the current situation? And that was my fears and anxiety. I just started asking myself questions like, oh gosh, like what are these things? And then, you ask the question of like, what's the worst possible implications and outcomes? I mean, I remember a time where we were doing work like this with somebody and you asked them to say that, and then they're standing on this thing that kind of said their fear, and then you moved it like 5 feet to the right and you said, now come stand over here. And I was like, now tell me what you're really scared of. Like that was a good like little facade.
Yeah.
Good job. You taught yourself to do that. Where did you learn it? And then for me it was like, okay, well, we could run out of money and the business could close. We spent so many years creating it. No clients, got to push them off. And I have to lay off my employees, find another job. What if there is no jobs?
Yeah.
Like
And then
that's
what? Keep going.
exactly. You man.
Well,
Now you took me over there.
Yeah. Well, but keep going, because
Lose the
that story.
house,
Yeah,
no
exactly.
money, lose the house,
Yeah.
move back in, with
Yeah.
my in-laws. Like there's
Yeah.
so many things that
See,
an
if you can't say
entrepreneur.
out loud if you can't say those things out loud, because those are real fears,
Yeah.
and then you're just talking about some of the physical implications.
Sure.
What about the psychological implications? It's like, oh gosh, like I'm a failure. Like I couldn't weather the storm. Other people did. Next week, someone tells you how great they're weathering the storm. Well, now you feel even worse about yourself. So to allow yourself to have the fears, to give voice to the fear that, gosh, this could really be bad.
Mm-hmm.
The further you're willing to take that, like at some point you'll bottom out, like you'll bounce eventually. But I think we stop so far short of allowing ourselves, we figured out ways to medicate from bottoming out,
Yep.
and what happens next? Just keep pulling the thread.
Yep.
It's
And I think
terrifying.
It is. And as you start to go that, like I thought I was going fine, and it's almost like pausing and go, well, what's after that? What's after that? You know? And I think and I think what's very powerful though, is that when you ask the question, how would you respond if this was the way you're like the reactive part of it? And I think that was kind of the final question in that first thing, you know, and just kind of going back to and then you kind of go, well, like, where did I learn this? How did I go back to this? You know, I power up, I quick push through, I would, you know, put the family to the side and go, you know, like all these things that are, you know, that I'm just going to go do. And so I think that's an important question to ask of how you react, because you got to look, hey, this is how I'm going to react to
Yeah.
this and respond to this.
If you don't,
Um,
if you don't know how afraid you are, it's going to come out sideways, right? It's going to leak
sure.
out or blow out on people around you.
Yep.
Like so if you walk into a room and you don't realize you're afraid of being in that room,
Mm-hmm.
like you're going to become impulsive. You're going to act bigger than you should, or you're either going to overfunction or underfunction.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to power up or you're going to power down. You're going to depress yourself or try to impress yourself, you know, and it's like, that
Sure.
rhymes. I like that.
Yeah.
Um,
Write that down.
no. But But you're right. But somebody who can walk into the room and say, "Man, I know that I'm walking into this crisis, and this could go really bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I know how afraid I am." You don't
Mm-hmm.
stay there, right? You're going to take us to the next step, because
Yep. So that's what I was going to say. The
that's
next thing
one
you ask
step.
is after the fear, you go to the next one and it says, you know, what's important to talk about our hopes and optimism during this time. You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, in the crisis, how do you look at that and what can you hold on to? And you know, you immediately go from to like what's the hope and what could be in that moment. So why is that important to kind of just go this from both polarities?
So people will either use they will either use hope and optimism and faith as an escape from their
Mm,
problem, or
yep.
they'll use fear and anxiety. Like, I'm super anxious and control. They'll use all that to escape their problem.
Mm-hmm.
If you can let them explore both sides, what do you hope for? Man, I really hope I'm going to come through this thing with flying colors. I really hope this happens. And I really believe that I could do this. And I think this could happen. And I know it's going to get better. Okay. Those things are true too. Like, it's true for you.
Sure.
It's just as true as the fact that you think it's all going to burn. You know, it's all going to burn, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to lose everything, to, I think I could save the day here. Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
I've got what it takes. And all you're doing is pushing that thermostat onto both sides, right? You're
Yep.
allowing yourself to tell the truth about all of who it's like to be you, rather than
Yep.
just what's appropriately safe. No, I wouldn't
Mm-hmm.
do this on social media, despite people are doing this. Uh, you know, I would keep it within the confines, but find a place to explore your hopes. What do you want for yourself? You are in a crisis. What do you want? Like,
Yep.
what's good about this? And so you've got to explore both sides of that polarity.
You know what was really fascinating to me is I did this and I was exploring my fears. I was like, well, there's probably a whole bunch of other leaders that I work with experiencing very similar fears about leading teams and stuff like that, even their family. And then when I went to the hope, it almost created this ability to like really connect with them and go, I think that they're probably feeling this, and I hope that we can develop something that could actually help them, you know, in understanding both of those and why both of those polarities are important and how they can ultimately, you know, have optimism during this time, but still lean into the fear. Because, you know, you
Yeah.
say, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, to your point, if you've done this work first, like, if you know how afraid you are, and you know how hopeful and optimistic and how empowered you feel at the same time, well, when someone shows up and says, "Gosh, man, I'm just freaking out right now," you don't just say, "It's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. You'll
Yeah.
be okay." Well, they're not okay.
Mm-hmm.
You're more competent and more collected and more present to say, "Tell me what you're afraid of," because you know what you're afraid of.
Yep.
And then they're like, "I'm afraid of this and this and this." And you say, "And what else?" "And I'm
Mm-hmm.
afraid of this and this and this." "And what else?" And all of a sudden, they're sitting there looking at you, feeling safer. They're feeling seen. And then you look at them and say, "Well, and what do you want? What do you hope
Sure.
for? What do you long for?" But you can give them that gift because you're willing to go those places yourself. You can't give them what you're not willing to do yourself.
Yeah. And then you talk about after those, it's kind of, we have this impulsive, defensive, reactive strategies, and behaviors that we kind of go into in a crisis like this. Why is that? Why do you think or feel that's an important thing to pull out? You just talked about their fears, their hopes, and now like we're kind of getting into this reactivity strategy so we can identify maybe, right, what we've done in the past, but even today. So go ahead and share on why that's important for us to at least say it.
So we spend most of our lives figuring out how to manage our lives, and life is hard. Life is hard. Oh, life is beautiful. Yeah, yeah, and it's tragic. Like, I don't know who it was, Anthony Hopkins or somebody. He's like, nobody's getting out alive. Like, nobody is getting out of this life alive. So there's some beauty and tragedy. Where like everyone will either leave or you will leave them or they will leave you. Okay. And so we have learned how to manage this reality. We coping mechanisms, like it could be control, it could be substances, it could be shopping, it could be relationships, it could be codependencies, whatever those are. You're going to go to those things first because those are the things that you've learned to do to feel safe. So now all of a sudden you've explored your fears. Gosh, I'm really afraid. Well, usually one of your impulse reactivities would have kicked in when you did that. If you do this exercise, I want you to notice when you're doing the first step, something along the line said, all right, that's enough now. Don't get too crazy here. Like,
Sure.
okay, that's your medication. That's your impulsivity to say, enough. We're not going any further. And if you don't identify the fact that there's parts of who you are that are managing you to feel safe, which is appropriate, it's also okay to help come to the place where you're willing to acknowledge your impulses. Oh gosh,
Mm-hmm.
I just want to go out and buy something on Amazon right now. Okay. Okay. You don't want to. You're probably afraid of something. If you know that that's what you do, and you begin to
Mm-hmm.
become familiar with what you do to avoid being afraid, or what you do to avoid having hope, because you're afraid of having hope, then you'll begin to start to see what your impulsive behaviors are like. For some, it
Right.
may be like, you're fine, you're good, like it's going to be amazing. Optimism is sometimes an impulsive reactivity that is very lonely to be around. Have you ever been in a like suffering? I have more recently, but you've been in such a struggle, and people will say, "You're doing great, you're great," and I'm often like, "Oh, okay, thanks." Like, I mean, okay,
Sure. Yeah.
well, I'm glad, but they need you to be great.
Mm-hmm.
So you begin to notice the strategies that we've grown up with, or that we've taken on to keep ourselves safe. And I'm not here to shame them. I have them. We all have them. I'm just here to say, like, get to know them
Sure. So when we
because
do,
that'll
yeah.
help.
So when we do that impulsive, like really kind of step into this, when we access our courage and how to process, basically our fears and our thoughts, what can we do, bring it into this, crisis, the inner work that you've done, your hopes, and integrate these tensions. How do you kind of bring it all together and accessing that courage of, that and understanding that? Because that's kind of a pivoting point, in the exercise. You've
Yeah,
looked at, you've considered it, fear, the hope, impulsive. Now, how do we kind of put it together?
I think, courage is not the absence of fear. Okay, so we think courage and we think it's like typically we mix up courage and bravado. Like, I'm going to go out there, let's do it.
Kill
No,
it.
no. The most courageous people are courageous because they know how afraid they are. And but what they want, they're willing to overcome their fears to go after what they want. Okay, so you've got your fear and your anxieties, and then you've got your hopes and dreams and desires and your wants and your capabilities, and you're looking at these two together. Well, courage says, let's bring those together and let's integrate them. So if you told me like, oh, I had to get up on a stage in front of 5,000 people and I didn't even think about it, well, you didn't need courage for that, which meant you probably weren't afraid. Okay, but if you were afraid, like I'm afraid of this, afraid of that, but then you can still step onto that stage, or you can still take that risk. Now you've accessed courage, because courage had to overcome fear. But the most courageous people know how afraid they are, and they know how much they want something. And you're in a crisis. I'm in a crisis right now. So you've got to know what you want, and you've got to know what you're afraid of. And then you've got to bring them together And then at some point you've got to integrate them and say, I I don't know if like here's an example for your story. I mean, without putting words in your mouth, but
Sure.
gosh, it's really terrifying to be in this environment right now as a business
Mm-hmm.
owner. I I'm really afraid that I could lose my company. Could have to lay off some employees, and then I know how far that trail goes. But I'm also competent, and I'm also aware, and I also know what I want. And so when you showed up to work today, you had to show up with courage. You came with courage. It was you knew the odds, you knew the risks, and you also knew the rewards. And I'm saying, man, that's the most courageous you can be.
Mm.
And so and then when you show up, you're willing to to be present because you're actually there. But if I'd showed
Mm-hmm.
up today and you and I this morning chatted and you're like, it's gonna be fine, everything's gonna be awesome. And I go, well, it is like, and you're like, yeah, just think positive. We got to just be positive about this thing. I'm like, well, really? And so if we can integrate the fear and the faith, I think we really bring us to that third position, which is courageous. And at some
Yeah.
point, like, what did we do in the beginning? The last step is saying out loud your
Yep.
courageous acts. And the first step was saying out loud your challenge.
Yep.
And you have to say it out loud at the end. Now that you've done all this work, at the end, you've got to make some kind of statement. I think I ask people to make 3 statements, right?
Yeah.
And I
Mm-hmm.
say, make 3 statements that are courage statements.
Mm-hmm.
And you got to say them out loud. And
Mm-hmm.
somebody else has got to hear them. Go tell your wife, tell your friends, tell
Yeah.
somebody about your 3 statements of courage.
Yeah, it's eerie how close like that courage statement is to what you said, because it was very similar to that, and understanding the terrifying part of it, but then also, the competency and where it was at. And the one thing that you do say, which I think is very important for other people to understand, is before you even write that is everybody has their own story and uniqueness. And you ask them to say, how can that, and what are your giftings, backstory, strengths, and beliefs be brought in,
Yes.
and why is that so important to the final kind of step of courage? And we'll wrap it up.
No, you're right there. I even forgot about that step. But so think about it. You've explored your fears. You've explored your hopes, your faith, your longings of what, and then it's like, okay, but, and who are you? You are a
Mm,
competent human being.
yeah.
You have unique giftings. There's parts of who you are that bring a joy to this world. Like at some point, you've got to have some healthy pride. Like, this is what I bring to the world.
Mm,
And you don't do that as a narcissist. You do that as somebody who has a sense of self-worth. And you do that with humility. But you can go, you know what? In my story, I have overcome obstacles similar to this.
yeah.
I am a resilient human being. I have come through a lot. Okay, that's yours. That's maybe one of your unique stories, one of your unique giftings. So you're bringing those things. You help people identify their uniqueness so that they can bring it to their courage, to their faith, to their fears. And then, to your point, make those last statements in light of all of that. What am
Yeah.
I going to go now do?
Yep.
And we're back to the world. We're back to what the world likes, which is all of us like, what do I do about this? But
Mm-hmm.
I've taken you on a huge rabbit trail through your heart and through your soul
Yeah.
to get you back to what to do.
Yeah, and we appreciate that. I think that getting to that last statement, which I got to as I was going through this, and then writing something that is like really, that is comforting as much as it is terrifying, as much as it is true, as much as it is a sense of understanding, really helped me be able to show up in every situation, a little bit more present, and
Mm,
knowing that, if I can show up that way, either by saying it, or doing it, hopefully others can lean into that as well. Because at the end of the day, we all need this,
yeah,
and because they're in there. This is just, I look at this as an opportunity to, like you said at the beginning, bring your insides out with yourself individually. And
yeah,
then I guess my final 2 questions are this, Rob, is that now that we've done all this, what do we do with it?
yeah.
Like, I know it's a process for, work on yourself, but I know I have some ideas, but like, what would you do that you've done this? it takes about 15 minutes, 20 minutes it took me. And
Yeah.
then, you've answered all these things. You have like, what would you do next? What would you tell people to do next?
I don't know.
It's awesome.
Brad, I didn't get that far. No,
Yeah.
no, you know what? I don't want to
Should they,
prescribe.
sure.
Let
Should
me,
they share it with their family or like their spouse
oh,
or their
oh,
team or leaders?
you're thinking in a kind way. I'm sitting there thinking, well, let me finish my quick thought.
Sorry, my bad.
No, I think you do this work, and so often I'm not here to prescribe you anything. That's the point of this exercise. So at the end of the
Hmm.
exercise, I don't know what you're going to do with it. Like, this isn't a like, here's how you get crap done. Here's how you face your life. Here is an experience for you to have more of yourself. Now you have a little bit more of yourself than you did before you started. I don't know. What are you going to do with that? Hopefully not force feed it down someone else's throat. Hopefully experience yourself a little more, and they'll begin to experience you differently. And so then all of a sudden you can look at the people around you, and to your point, yeah, turn around to someone next to you who looks like they're flailing. They're either like polarizing between the world is going to be okay and I think we're all going to die, and say, hey, would you pause for a minute and pull on this thread? Why don't you go do this exercise? Why don't you explore why don't you push yourself out of the panic situation that you're in? And maybe it'll help them strategically walk through their fears and their hopes so that they can wake up at the end of this and go, here's how I am going to step into the world more courageously. I don't know what those steps will be. I don't know what
Sure.
they'll choose to do. I just know it'll be a lot different than if I sent you a news article that gave you some information that said to you, here's what courage means.
Hmm.
I would like you to learn the definition of courage. Okay? You can learn that, but until you actually do that and experience that, it's going to be really hard to be courageous. So
Sure.
yeah, do it, sit in it, do it again. I mean, I have enough. The first prompt is, what is the giant in your life? I have plenty, I have so many, but to go back and to pick another challenging situation in your life. Oh gosh, this one was about my work, but maybe I have to redo this exercise. And now I'm stuck in a house with my spouse, and we weren't doing that well before this all started. And so now our marriage is experiencing this friction and challenge. Okay, that's a giant.
Yeah.
Redo the exercise. What are you afraid of? What do you hope for? Okay, what
Sure.
is the next courageous step? You know?
That's great. Yeah, I love it. I think that, as I've done this and I sent it to, my wife, and I had my team do it just so they could do it on their own,
Yeah,
whatever. And they said it was very helpful to process some of the emotions, and at least in this crisis that we're in right now. Because the one thing that we can end, we're all in something right now together,
yeah,
for us, which is knowing that this is a tool that can at least help you, get your insides out on some paper, put it. And the nice thing is when you're done and hit submit, it comes right to your inbox and you can just look at it if you want to,
yeah.
and kind of dissect it or take it out and do another one. I think that's great. Well, Rob, I just want to say, thank you so much, for joining us today and kind of talking through that exercise with us. And is there any last maybe thoughts that you might have? And then I'm going to, really give some people some different things to get, to hear more about you and what you're doing, and I'll
Yeah.
be able to provide that. Is any last thoughts on any of this?
I think if anything, take the exercise as an experience. Don't do it as something to do. It's not a checklist. I don't care if there's no passing grade. It's not like you got it right or wrong. It's really the questions prompt an invitation for you to explore your insides. And then at the end, the hope is that they can compel you to do something differently than what you're doing now.
Yeah.
So see that as an experience and give yourself to the process. Uh, and I think that's the greatest gift you can give yourself, to face that, and a gift to your family and your friends.
Yeah.
But other than that, no, I don't have any. I don't want to say my last words just yet. We'll see how the virus works out. I want to save those for the end
Sure.
days.
Sure. Again, Rob and I have been able to travel, with each other for a while. And I think that one of the things that I appreciate about him is what you've just seen today. He brings himself, he brings, honesty, transparency, truth, and just shows up for us so that we can show up for others. One thing that I will say that I have loved, that he's actually just getting into, and I'd encourage all of you as we're sitting at home and can listen to some podcasts. He has a thing called Talk of Change podcast, and it is really good. It brings this really four people from the home, four people from the work, and really how
Yeah.
do you bridge that gap between work and home? And there's some amazing guides that he's developed that are just, I mean, they're first class. And I'd really encourage all of you to listen to those podcasts. And then also like download some of those guides and maybe go through it, you know, with your family, with your team, whatever. But there's some really great people that he's interviewed, other than me. And then and I encourage you to, you know, take a listen to the Talk of Change podcast.
Awesome. Well, Brad, thanks for having me,
Yeah, it's been
and
great.
looking forward to it. Yeah, well, let's do it again.
Yep, and all of our links in our bios and all that kind of stuff will be the link to this exercise. So,
Excellent.
all right.
All right.
Thanks, Rob. All right.
See ya.
See ya.
Bye.
All right. Bye-bye. And if anybody has any questions, I can get those to Rob. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to put this out. So if you want to share this with anybody, we're going to get that out to everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks to Rob for creating this. And I just really encourage all of you to lean in to your fears. And like it says, you might recover your courage during this time. Take care.